Hello everybody, welcome to this KULeuven talk at the fantastic Ancienne, Belgique. A talk dedicated to how will AI impact the future of music. We have tons of stuff to talk about. We only have 90 minutes, so let's dive right in. We'll talk about creative aspects, more business side of things, of course, legal side of things as well. So, as I said, plenty of stuff to talk about. First, I would like to invite to the stage Hazel Savage, co-founder of Museo, AI company that got acquired by SoundCloud a couple of years ago, where she is currently VP Music Intelligence. So she knows her way around data, AI, machine learning, stuff like that. She will give us a short introduction as to what AI is, could be, should be maybe, and give us extra stuff to talk about during the panel. Hazel, please, the floor is yours.
So much, everyone, and I've got some help here on the slides, which I'm very excited to show you about. So we can go to the first slide. Thank you. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. I came from the north of England today. Got a train at 9 a.m. this morning. Got here about 2 hours ago. So very, very excited. Love the Eurostar. Very excited to be here. So my name is Hazel Savage. I am British, but I built and sold my company Museo in Singapore. So I was the co-founder, and I had a Swedish technical co-founder called Aaron, and we built Museo starting in 2018, and we sold it to SoundCloud in April of 2022. So I currently work at SoundCloud. Been there for about a year and a half. And previously, I'd worked in music tech for about 18 years. So I started at a very small startup, employee number 20, that no one had heard of in London, called Shazam. Now everyone's heard of it, which is exciting. But at the time, nobody cared, which is always fun. And for anyone in the room who isn't 40, as I am, the way Shazam used to work, for anyone who doesn't know, is it was pre-smartphone. So now you just press an app on your phone, but it used to be you used to have to dial the 4 numbers down the middle of the keypad, 2580. So the company I worked for was called Shazam, 2580. You rung the phone number, held it up, and it would send you a text message back. So there you go, a little fun fact for anyone who was not around pre-2007. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about how I got into AI and the problems that I was identifying and the things that I worked on. So having reached my 40th birthday this very year, and having worked in the industry for a long time, my very, very first job was I used to work at a record store called HMV in London on Oxford Street. And we got, I thought that was some love for HMV. Come on in, get them seats in, wherever you want. And basically, I used to be one of the people who would put the CDs on the shelves on a Sunday night, ready for sale on a Monday morning. And on a kind of an average week, there was like maybe 5 or 6 CD singles. That was when all new music was released. You know, Sunday night, shut the shop, put the CDs on the shelves. Monday morning, 9 a.m., queue outside. And of course, we know it doesn't work like that anymore. You can upload music, 24/7 to SoundCloud, or you can go through a distributor and put your music online. So what we see now is, you know, when I first started in 2018 telling this story, it was 60,000 songs a day uploaded to Spotify. Then in 2020, I had to update it to 80,000 songs a day. And I think the last press release said 100,000 songs a day on Spotify released. So we now have more music released every single day than used to come out in a whole year. That's the challenge, because it's great that the opportunity is everywhere, but how do we actually find anything if we go from 5 CD singles a week to 100,000 tracks a day? So working with my co-founder, I just asked him the simple solution: could an AI listen to music? And he told me that it probably could. That was our big guess in 2018. So what we did was we take the MP3s, we take the WAVs, and we just simply turn it into something a computer can translate. Is it as good as a human? Of course not. But it can do 5 million tracks a day, so it's efficient in that way. And the way I describe it, if we have some musicians in the room, is if you imagine looking at a waveform front on, and at SoundCloud we use the waveforms on every track. You can kind of see where it like fades in, you can see where it fades out, you can see where the dynamics are, you can see sort of where the drop is, if there is a drop. But what you can't see looking at a waveform is you can't tell if there's a vocal on it, you can't tell the genre of that song, But all of that information is there. So what we do, instead of looking like front on at a waveform, it's like we've gone up and over the top and we're looking down. And all of that information is stacked in the MP3 or the WAV file. It's simply a case of writing an AI that can understand it, that can interpret it. And so this is how we built Musio, the ability to listen to music using AI. And a little bit of the history of the company. We have 75 customers. Even though we are part of SoundCloud now, I say we're like the AWS to their Amazon. We are still selling our products publicly. So we have 75 customers in 11 countries, and we've tagged over 500 million tracks to date. And here is a little bit of the people that we work with. So I kind of love the slide with who our customers are, because I'm allowed to talk about it now, but SoundCloud were our biggest customer before they bought the company, but we were never allowed to say that publicly. They wanted it to be a secret, so no one else knew what was happening. But now they bought us, so everyone knows. We are the team responsible for making sure that all the music that gets uploaded to SoundCloud, all 345 million tracks, have the correct information added to them. But we also work with lots of other music companies, so Sony Music, Beat Club, BeatStars, Epidemic Sound. And we did a really cool campaign with Vans in China where we actually used our technology to do some talent search. So to be able to find songs that they wanted to put on tour with the artist Youngblood. So that was fun. And I do find as well, building my company in Asia, they play it a bit faster and looser with the applications of AI, which I'm sure we'll come on to in the panel. But I wanted to give you one example of the Musio technology specifically, the technology that we built. And I did choose what I thought would be like a local artist. I just did this on the Eurostar today. I am actually a huge Soulwax fan, and I like their rock album that they brought out. That was kind of definitely my vibe. So I went with a sample that I thought everyone would hopefully relate to. Did this presentation in Finland, and I used him. That went down really well. Did this presentation in Germany, chose the Scorpions, totally bombed. Not Scorpions fans in Germany, apparently. I'm a big fan. I like classic rock. So here's what's happening. So actually, I put the URL up there, the bit.ly. You can actually try this demo on your phone, on your laptop. It's totally free. The Musio demo is always free because there's a guy in Japan who tags 200 tracks a week using our free demo. I guess he doesn't want to pay for it. I don't really care. He's having a good time. If he wants to copy and paste that much data, he is welcome to. So we've got the bit.ly down there, but essentially it's just on the Musio website. You go to our tag product and we have a search bar, and you can drop in any SoundCloud or YouTube link into that demo. And then what will happen? So I went to YouTube and I got the Soulwax song, my favorite Soulwax song, and I copied it within Music and Spoke URL, and I dropped it into the Musio demo. And what happened was it processes the track in real time, so it creates that fingerprint as I discussed. And then after it's fingerprinted the track, it generates the tags based on the data that it sees in that MP3, based on what we've trained it to identify before. And then here's a visualization that we've done of the data that we're able to get. So firstly, content type, it's music. That's exciting. When we first started the company, we just did, is it music or is it not music? Then we started working with a lot of clients like BMG who were like, we have tons of sound effects and we have tons of podcasts and we have tons of samples. So we went more granular. So we do 8 different audio types now, all within music and spoken word. But it's definitely music, and the AI is 83% sure, which I'm pretty happy with for a YouTube video. So the percentage is how confident that the AI is that tag is correct. It's not like a genetic makeup or a pie chart type thing. And then when we go over to genre, you'll see that we've got rock, 70%, alternative rock, 64%. So we do between 1 and 4 genres, depending on where the AI sees the cutoffs. And again, we've got a 70 and a 64% surety. This is good because it allows our clients to go, okay, we'll take the highest percentage and that's the primary genre. Or don't show anything below 50%. Or if you said don't show anything below 75%, you would only get the genre rock in this case. So we're always trying to give our clients as much flexibility as possible, but then some want as many data points as possible. So they might just go, show us everything, regardless of how low the score. And then we go over to an energy spectrum. We've got moods, we've got an emotion spectrum, kind of bang in the middle. Instruments that we've identified. So as I said, this is a rock song. So we've got bass, drums, guitar, percussion. And then we've got this kind of vocal tag bar in the middle. So instrumentation, is it vocal or is it instrumental? This is a vocal track. Vocal register sounds like male. You can flip that to sounds like low register, sounds like high register, depending on how you want to represent your catalogue. Also, it will recognise duets, mixed. And then we've got vocal presence, so how much vocal is on the track, the entire track. So there's a lot. It's a lot of singing. And auto-tune presence detected, none. So good one. You can go drop some T-Pain in there and see how it performs. And then at the bottom, we've just created a sentence that says, this track is of medium quality. It's referring to the recording quality. Now, this album was pretty lo-fi, which might explain for the medium quality, although Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, the original mastering, is also medium quality. It's not a judgment call. These are some fantastic songs. It's really just about, you know, Rihanna's latest production in $1 million studio is going to say very high quality, but anything from the 70s. And we also need to factor in that I did just drop in a YouTube video. You might not always have the original. There might be some loss to the audio quality. So with a YouTube video, you can sometimes take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But we've got medium quality here. It's in the key of D minor. It's 138 beats per minute, and it does not vary much across the life of the track, small variants. So we're able to sort of generate this sort of 20 to 30 pieces of metadata per track. And we do that to the tune of 5 million tracks a day across all of our clients globally. And I always say, you know, if you wanted to just play that song out loud now, and we all sat and took 10 minutes and wrote it down and the genres and tagged it ourselves, most people in this room would probably do a better job. But the reality is, when we're doing 5 million tracks a day, that's more than humans could ever manage to do. And then if those tracks don't have this data, they can't get playlisted, they can't get recommended, they can't get searched, and they can't get discovered. So we really saw it as an additive benefit to the industry. We've had this huge explosion of content. That's great. Everyone's got a DAW on their phone. Anyone can create music. How do we as an industry respond and make sure that we can still create opportunities for those artists? So that's what I'm excited about. But also, I just wanted to show you on my last slide a couple of other companies that I'm excited about. Because I talk a lot about AI. I invest in other AI companies. Full disclosure, I might have invested in a couple of these companies. And I just, you know, for anyone who's new to the industry or to AI, these are some cool ones to check out. So AudioShake do source separation. So you can drop in a full track and it will pull apart the vocals, the guitar, the drums, everything. But they do it really well. Because up until a couple of years ago, that tech was very not good. And now it's pretty good. So you can check out AudioShake. Both Soundful and Make It are generative AI companies, but very, very strictly operating in the space of not using copyrighted content to train on. So both really interesting companies. And then Master Channel is an AI mastering company. So you might be familiar with Lambda and other companies in the space. And they've come out with spatial AI mastering, which I think is really interesting, making spatial mastering affordable for the majority of artists. And then also Unheard, who are kind of if you're a freelance artist, I describe it as like the app is the to-do list for the DIY artist. You log in, it pulls in your Spotify profile, and then it auto-generates, hey, you should pitch to this playlist. Hey, you should send this press release. Hey, you should run this Instagram story. So really trying to, in the same way at Museo, I tried to scale up how we recognize and find music. They're trying to scale up the DIY music experience. So feel free to check any of those companies out. And that is me. So thank you so much for listening to my intro on AI.
Wow, thanks a lot. That was fast. Within 15 minutes, great. Well done, well done. There's time for Q&A later on. Thank you so much, Hazel. I would like to invite my other panelists to the stage and get familiar with each other. While people are coming on stage, I would like to know who the audience is today. So maybe just a quick hands up. Who is an artist in the audience? Artists, okay. Music industry professionals? Yeah. Just people interested in tech, maybe? Not familiar with music or... Okay, great. That's good to know. Okay. So, hi everybody. Hazel, we know you already. So
hello again.
Thanks again for being here. Ashley Morgan, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Independent music producer,
yes.
Visual artist.
Yes.
People might still know you under your moniker LTGL.
Yes, that's a while ago.
That's a while ago.
Yes.
Now you found your own voice as Ashley Morgan, so welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
We have Brecht de Man. Brecht is the head of research department at PXL Music High School in Hasselt. Also has a PhD, yeah, that's correct. And a real audio nerd, can I say that? But in a good way, maybe? I can say that. Software developer, familiar with one of the cases we just heard about, with Lander, the AI mastering company. You used to develop stuff for Lander, so okay, that's great, welcome. And Josephine van Herpen. She has a PhD in law. She's an assistant professor at the CITIP department of the KULeuven, and knows everything about IP. Can I say that? A lot about IP.
It depends.
It depends. Yeah. that's a typical answer. So yeah, great panel. Welcome everybody. We're going to touch upon a number of subjects. We're going to talk about AI in the creative process, of course. We're going to talk about legal stuff. But first of all, just to kick off the conversation, I would like to hear from each of you. There's been a lot going on in the past year, the past 2 years, the past year and a half. According to you all, what is the most exciting and the most scary development in the AI domain of the past year, for example? Maybe kick off with you, Hazel.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. I think, well, the biggest development for me personally is that when I started an AI company in 2018, nobody gave a shit. I don't hope no one minds a bit swearing. But in the last 6 months, it's suddenly become like the hot new thing. Mm-hmm. So now everyone wants to talk about it, whereas I've been boringly talking about it for 5 years now. And there are a lot of opportunities and there are a lot of threats, but there's also a lot of misinformation.
Okay.
So I'm always out there with my kind of catchphrase, AI for good.
Okay.
But I'm sure we'll get onto that a bit more.
Let's talk about AI for good later on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ashley, what's interesting to you as an artist, as a creative person? What can you use? What are you afraid of?
Yeah,
First
I think
thoughts.
just to summarize my general, how I see AI in terms of creativity is just like an amazing new tool that we can use to explore arts, creativity, and stuff in general. So in general, I'm just excited about this evolution. And I think the only thing that's pretty scary to me is just like, I guess, AI crime or stuff like that, you know? Nowadays, you don't know what's real or fake, you know? So
Okay, you're talking about deep fakes and stuff like
that?
that?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay.
But in general, I think it's cool. It's exciting.
Yeah, just to put the question out there, because that's a question that's often being asked to creative people, artists. Are you afraid of being replaced by AI? That's one of the main discussions going on, of course. Because
I guess in that sense, I'm a little, I would say pessimistic, but like I'm aware that I'm probably gonna be replaced in some areas, but I'm totally fine with that.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's a cool thing to be alive in this day and age where we can see this tech evolve.
Okay.
So I don't know, I'm all for it.
Let's touch upon that a little bit later as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Brecht, same question to you.
Yes, so I'm thinking of two sides of the same coin, kind of. I'm very excited that whereas a decade ago AI was kind of like a dirty word and not really, it was kind of like a tech thing, like not about if we should do it, but just can we do it. And I think right now it's very exciting to see that so many people are able to get their hands on AI and the artists as well, which is, you know, where it ultimately comes down to, not just tech people. At the same time, so the more pessimistic view is then there's obviously still a lot of AI happening on sort of the pure tech thing. So I'm concerned always a little bit that the AI and that the models and the tools to be able to do all of those things are and remain in the hands of big corporations and not so much democratizing music production.
Okay, cool. And
Actually,
you, Joseph?
And me, yes. I think I have kind of a similar answer as Hazel has, actually, to a certain extent, because I've been researching the interface between AI and intellectual property law for, I think, 4 years now. And suddenly in March, I'm like in newspapers and I get phone calls by journalists. And I was like, okay, people are starting to also think about stuff like this. And actually the first paper on the question, can a robot be an author in the sense of copyright law was published in 1986. So
Okay.
you know it's been around for a while. So it's kind of interesting to me that it's
But the
only
question
turning
still
up now.
stands, and it's coming your way later on. So
I'm ready for it.
I know you are. I know you are.
And then actually maybe the most scary thing to me is the way in which the legislature seems to now be rushing into making decisions. And I'm not sure, since they've only been thinking about copyright in particular overtly for the last 8 months or so, and they're making a decision on it right now. Like I hesitate to think of what they might do. And it's confidential at the moment, so nobody really knows. And that's a bit scary to me. Like so many people are thinking about these things at the EU level, not only for IP, but also just general like deepfakes and anti-terrorism measures and so forth. And we're just not sure what's going to come out of it.
So that's interesting, because actually what you're saying is hold your horses for a little bit and just reflect a bit more on what you're doing instead of rushing into new legislation, which, in my opinion, we really need right now. I mean, it should go fast, no?
Yeah, indeed, it should go fast. And for the terrorism, anti-terrorism measures and so forth, they've been thinking about it for a very long time, but they only started thinking about
the copyright aspect
when ChatGPT came to the market.
Sure.
And everyone's like, ChatGPT, now we certainly know there's a problem, and so forth. So that's really what got things started at the EU level in terms of we want to do something about copyright. First time it came to the fore that we need to do something about the training of AI models and so forth was the end of May 2023. And that's not that long ago.
That's not that long ago. No, true. Okay, so maybe before we go into greater detail, it might be a good thing. We've seen some business cases. We've seen some use
recommendations in the form of your weekly discovery or your daily mixes.
Is everyone here in the room who listens to music, who's using a streaming service on a daily basis, we're often very unaware of the fact that AI plays a major role in our listening habits already nowadays and has played a big role for the past couple of years. Can we expand a little bit on that, on how AI has actually like maybe formed our listening habits or is tracking our listening habits and doing stuff with that, just on that level?
Yeah, definitely. I think something I've pointed out for the last few years, if anyone here has a Spotify account or an Apple Music account, you are already experiencing AI recommendations in the form of your weekly discovery or your daily mixes or your service of choice. And also, YouTube. The sort of the right-hand sidebar on desktop is kind of AI algorithmic recommendations, and 70% of all listening on YouTube comes from that sidebar. So there's already a lot of power behind these algorithms and how things are served up. And I think a fun sort of interesting case I read about was like the Phil Collins song "Is It in the Air," where like it's like a 2-minute drum intro and then it drops, and then 30 seconds later song's done. And people have just said like that song just in the age of streaming wouldn't have succeeded because it doesn't often sort of get, no one would listen to the 2-minute drum intro to wait for the drop. So everyone is kind of interacting with AI on a daily basis, or even if they're not aware, even outside of music. I had the privilege. I got to work on a project with Rolls-Royce. The jet engine's not the car.
Okay.
Apparently, it's 2 different companies, and no, I can't have a free ar. Which is a real shame, because otherwise I would have done the work anyway. But basically, apparently, every single one of their jet engines, which is tens of thousands worldwide, at all times are sending real-time data on the performance of that engine back to their centralized hub, where AI is interpreting it to find out when it will need maintenance, how it's performing, how it's best optimized. And so just think, every time you're on a plane, AI is in action, working behind the scenes. So I think we all interact with it probably in more ways than we think.
Yeah. Same for cinema projectors, by the way. They send data as to the maintenance stuff and so on as well. So yeah, okay, there we go. And in the creative aspect, as you as an artist, and from the production side, how have you seen it evolve? Because Lander has been around for years, and how do you look at it, Ashley? I mean, is it to you? Is it all very new, very recent, or have you seen it at work, at play, in what you've been doing the last couple of years?
Yeah, in my personal like workflow or something, I don't think I've seen it impacted me in any way. I'm always kind of trying to stay up to date, trying to see like if there's anything that's like really practical. But I feel like in the music creation sphere, I feel like this is next, because I've been following the visual art stuff and all the text to image stuff like that, and it's crazy to see what it's done to that industry. But I kind of feel like music is next in a way, because I think the last thing I tried was like stable audio, I think, and it's like a text to audio website where you can just type in like, oh, I want to hear this, and then you get like a sample, and it's pretty cool. I just tried it out like one day, and afterwards I kind of forgot about it, because it's still kind of a hassle. Like I feel like if you have to translate your ideas into text and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does work for you as an artist? What kinds of tools would you need? Would you like really be glad to use in your
I
production?
feel like you were going to go like neural interface, like you want to skip the words and straight to
yeah, exactly.
Would you like that?
Like, because like for me, I feel like when because I use Ableton to create, and I feel like there's always like these hurdles. Like first, because you start with like your imagination and stuff, and then it needs to pass through like your knowledge of music, music theory and stuff like that, and then you get to the program and you need to know what every button does, what all these menus do and stuff like that, and then you can get to the end result and the sound that you actually hear. But I feel like anything that can help with removing those hurdles and make the process like more effective, it's so much more like easier to get into like a flow state when you're being creative. So I feel like,
and not the cue on the filter, blah blah blah.
Anyway, I think it could be cool, like whatever form it takes.
There must be tools doing that already, no? Or am I mistaken? I always think there's an AI for that, but maybe it's just my way of thinking.
Yes, so that's a very interesting point. I think that is definitely the goal of many AI tools, definitely when you're talking about production, to translate the waveform sort of mathematical properties of sound that are a bit harder to get into, like you need to be an audio engineer and have studied a number of years or something. Translating that to, we would call it semantic terms, to meaningful words, like you want to twist the punchiness knob and not the, cue on the filter, blah, blah, blah. So I think that is definitely a goal of many of the AI tools that you see out there. Whether they actually employ something that we would consider AI is something else, because there's been, I think there's been an interesting evolution when you ask about what has happened in sort of the production sphere. Like I said, there's been this point in time, maybe a decade ago, maybe a bit more, where AI was very much a dirty word, and people were scared about the impact of AI and sort of this job security aspect. And so when people did use AI tools, because the landers and the early isotope stuff, it was already there. It was kind of like I don't think people were very proud of it, or they were admitting that they were doing it. And then I think that has shifted a lot, whereas nowadays it's kind of cool to do things with AI. So I think that that stigma has definitely disappeared. But there's definitely still an aspect of sort of the opposite, where companies claim, okay, this is an AI thing, whereas that's usually code for this is not an AI thing.
Okay.
Just marketing. Yeah.
Okay, and why is that? I mean, just because we're on the hype cycle
it's hip and trendy, and
funding.
Yeah.
A lot of companies
Funding.
will say they've got AI so they can get like VC money.
Okay.
You don't have, and then you go to the team page and there's not a single tech person works there. Probably not AI. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Are a lot of so-called AI companies trying to solve problems that actually don't exist in the music industry? I always have like this opinion that tech companies are developing things for tech's sake, but not really to solve like a music issue. Or
I think that's true for any area of tech, yes, that people start from oh, this would be cool to do, but they're not really the target demographic themselves. So I think it's always very important to, and I've started, to work on things like that. Like, this is something I could probably do, and this is a fun problem, and I think that's fair. But at some point, when you want to make a product that's valuable, you need to work with a target demographic. In this case, the artists and or music producers. And,
Do you have the feeling that artists are not enough involved in the production or in the development process within tech companies at this stage?
If I can make a sweeping sort of on average statement, then probably yes, they could be involved more. But I think that is going to come inevitably when the VCs wise up and notice, like, oh, we're investing in all of these AI companies, but there are no real tangible value or problems.
Because when we were talking earlier on, you explained a number of things you are using at SoundCloud, and Ashley was immediately enthusiastic. Well, why don't we have that data? Why can't we? Do you involve artists in the things you are developing for SoundCloud?
I'm getting Ashley's email, so we can he can tell me all these great product ideas. And obviously you can iterate on your product, that you're building with artist feedback as well. But also they're going to kind of vote with their feet. We sort of created a product within SoundCloud where we let artists direct message their fans, right? So they can send them links to like private tracks and, you're my 10 super fans, you can listen to this track. And then we can instantly see if they use it or they don't use it. So that's one you can follow. But I must see like 10 pitch decks for startups every week. I'm not going to name the company, but my favorite one that I got last week where I was like, that's not a company that uses AI. It's like they kind of put their problem statement out as like, did you know only 2% of all the world's music has sheet music annotation? That means the market opportunity is 98% of all music ever. And I was like, no, it isn't. The reason that there isn't 100% of like detailed musical notation is not because it's not been done. It's because there's no demand.
Of course, why would we need it?
Yeah, I was like, the only person I know that likes sheet music is my husband, because he likes King Crimson, and he only wants it if Robert Fripp actually wrote it himself. He doesn't want an AI-generated version. So there's often a disconnect between what the real problem is and what the solution is. And we've seen that with generative AI a bit as well, I think.
Just to be the voice of classical musicians here, I like sheet music a lot.
Hey, there's 2% available.
I did forget to mention that you play the cello. How hot is AI with your students?
Sorry?
And I mean, how hot is AI with your students?
Well, I have a mandatory class, and there's a lot. There's a lot of different things to talk about.
Okay.
No, I have a few students actually who are very interested in AI and the intellectual property law, both from the aspect of like a patent, can a robot be an inventor, stuff like that. Trademark law, what we do with the relevant consumer idea and the confused consumer when the person buying the thing is an artificially intelligent system. But the most cool and interesting questions, obviously, are in the field of copyright law, and there's a lot of different things to talk about.
Okay.
But maybe jumping to what you said about the data stuff as well, like the amount of data that is being processed and amassed over time, and it's growing significantly with the advent of artificial intelligence. That also brings a few other fields of law into the equation. For example, just like access to data versus data ownership and questions in that regard, and also more in the field of like content moderation, where the Digital Services Act and ongoing stuff at the EU level is going to bring transparency requirements for AI recommender systems and so forth. So it all comes together at this very moment.
What does that mean, transparency requirements? Does it mean like you have to say, I used AI to make that track?
Yes, actually, it means a lot of things.
The track will get a stamp? This is human, this is AI created?
So, in principle, that would be one of the things that it means. For AI recommender systems, it would mean that the people that use those systems will have to give the parameters and make that clear to customers. So if you use Spotify and if you use like radio or the weekly playlist, you have to know on the basis of the terms and conditions basically how this arrangement was made. Now there's a phrase like the recommendations may be influenced by commercial considerations, which basically means if you pay, then you get on the playlist. But that's another discussion,
okay.
obviously.
Yeah.
And then transparency in terms of if you use an AI tool, what we do with it. It has two aspects. On the one hand, on the basis of what is now ongoing at the EU level, if you train an AI system using copyrighted content, you'll have to tell that you do so.
Okay.
Scope of that transparency requirement is still under discussion. Like, do you have to say which works exactly you put in the thing, or just in general, like, oh, I went to this website and then I moved that body of content inside the AI system on the one hand, and then on the other hand, once you have the system and once it's trained and you as a user put in a prompt or something and then make your own music or the AI's own music, depending on the type of AI system, you would have to say that you use AI in order to create the work at issue.
Can I just say that I understand the first part? That if you use copyrighted data to train an AI, that you have to be transparent about it, and that I'm not very much into who will benefit from the fact that you as an artist say that I used AI. Do you think that the audience cares at that point?
No, just to be clear as well, as a disclaimer, by saying all the things that the law now does, I do not express my agreement with all of the things that are ongoing and the law as it is and as it should be. It's,
But Ashley, if you use an AI tool that has been built to tailor to your needs and a tool that you really like, if you need to be transparent about it, do you want to be? I mean, does it care for you as an artist? How would you look at that AI tool at that moment? Is that just like a new instrument to you, or is it something you want to hide from your audience, or how do you think about these tools?
I don't think I would care if I need to say that I use this AI tool. I don't know. I don't know what the problem would be.
Do you think your audience would care? Do you think they would listen? That they would only listen to Ashley Morgan tracks that weren't made with AI, or maybe just the other way around?
I think the most important thing is just if the feeling behind the music.
If it's a banger.
Yeah, if it's a banger.
He always makes bangers. So.
It's a banger.
Would your answer be affected by the answers to the question whether you would not get copyright protection if you say that you use AI to make your music or not? Because we're going to talk about this later.
Let's go into that. It's no problem.
As the law stands, which is a super nice phrase us lawyers always use, as the law stands, copyright protection cannot be authorship cannot be accorded to an AI system. Doesn't have legal personality. It's just not the case. So people argue that if you use an artificially intelligent system to create music, and given that AI cannot qualify as an author as the law stands, people would argue that the person behind the AI doesn't have a sufficiently narrow connection with the music. And if that's accepted, then you would use an AI to help you create in a way, but you risk not having copyright protection at the end. Would that affect the answer to the question, like, would you want to tell people whether you use it or not?
Well, there's a lot going on in that question.
I know. Sorry.
Wow.
And whatever you decide right now is legally binding forever and ever.
Yes.
So make sure you understand.
It's being recorded.
Kidding.
No, I'll make sure you have a good lawyer. Don't worry.
I know someone.
Isn't that the core of the question? Because, I mean, and now we're going into that, can AI create a music be art? Can an artist use AI to create music? I mean, what you're saying now is really a big step, because imagine that you use ChatGPT or something else to create a new lyric, and you use that as a tool, as an instrument, but you create all the music around it and the musical IDs and stuff. You can't say that this track cannot be copyrighted. That seems like a huge leap to me.
I'm going to have to resort to my default, it depends there.
Okay.
So the question in copyright is whether there is a sufficiently narrow causal link between what you do and what comes out. Right? Mm-hmm. So depending on what you do, what you put in as the prompt, whether you select certain things or whether you change the parameters or whether you tweak it a bit afterwards, it all contributes to the ultimate question, is this enough? And I always make the analogy with Jackson Pollock paintings, again, but now without expressing any artistic fandom for Jackson Pollock, because I'm not a fan. But Jackson Pollock, when he has the paintbrush in his hand, doesn't really know where it's going to land, right?
Okay.
In a similar way, when you put something in the system, you don't really exactly know where it's going to land. And especially in like black box systems, where it's all a bit fuzzy inside, it's even more difficult to know. And the causal link gets a bit longer and longer. But we provide copyright protection to Jackson Pollock paintings. But why would we then not do the same for work that are made using an artificially intelligent system? But the problem is we don't have case law yet. So it's very hard to say, like, okay, this is enough, you will get copyright protection, and this is not enough, so you lose out.
Yeah, of course.
And my take on it as well is that obviously the law is the law, but at this point, without those examples, to me, what I think matters to artists are the copyright is important, not just for the sake of having the copyright, but so you get paid. Mm-hmm. And if you are not going to get, like, every artist just wants to make enough money to make a living, and you want your bank for whatever you've created. So, you know, theoretically, and I've thought about this a lot, like, I don't have any issue with generative AI. I don't think there should be any limits on creativity or any limits on what people want to do. You know, if people started posting to Instagram hundreds of thousands of photos a day, and it used to be the preserve of people who could afford film and cameras, it doesn't matter. Let as many people do it as they want. But it's when we can't figure out who should be getting paid and that money is not, you know, equally distributed, that's when it's a problem. If the theory was, you know, every single person who releases a track ever, regardless of whether there's copyright, gets £1 million, then no one would really care too much about the copyright. But at the minute, it's how you get paid. So I think that's the end goal that we're trying to figure out.
Okay, I get that. When you say that, you just put a prompt into a tool and you use the result that comes out from the first time, and you upload it to SoundCloud or to Spotify or something like that. I get that. I get your point. But I mean, you would never do that as an artist, would you?
Yeah, no.
Would you?
No. No. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, use it in the way that you described it.
So where would you draw the line between this is my input as a real artist and this is where I use a tool that helps me in creating and supports my creative process?
Yeah, I think I have to be careful with my like opinions about like copyright and stuff, because I have no knowledge about that and stuff.
That's
but
okay. That's an opinion.
I like to think about these things sometimes and just remove the money aspect from it, and then I feel like it's what do I want to say? I lost it. Lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No worries. You'll get it back. How do you think about it from the production side?
So yes, so from the production side, I mean, I think that's a good example, because I don't think we would be arguing for loss of ownership or copyright if you use an automatic mastering tool, because that doesn't influence the melody or the lyrics or anything that we consider like the heart and soul of the song. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very good example to then go, okay, at what point do you think now the song is more produced by the AI than by the human? Because I think in the vast majority of practical cases, AI will always be a tool that we have at our disposal in the music production process. So even in the most extreme case, I think even if you had just a button and you would say, okay, this button generates a song based on some random parameters, or maybe like which angle you press the button or something like that. And I would still, if that is my way of making songs, I would still press it like 1,000 times and then select and then curate what comes out, and then select what I think is the most kind of like Jackson Pollock painting, like just, you know, swing it like 1 million times, and then like the really good ones I put up in a gallery. Then I would argue, again, not being a lawyer, I would argue that then I'm still an artist. But I think that is a very extreme case.
Selection process
because there's this selection process. But I think in most cases, so maybe this is too far in the extreme. But I think in almost all cases where we're talking about AI-generated music, especially early on, like all these companies and artists claiming, this is AI music and using it as a selling point. There is so much curation going on, but there's also very often the instruments are still played by humans. There's some corrections on the melody and the harmony and the lyrics and so on to make it a bit better. So I think in all of those cases, AI is a source of inspiration. AI is maybe an efficiency enhancer sometimes, but it's never sort of the heart and soul of what writes the song. So I think in a lot of the cases, I wouldn't think it's that extreme, and it's not really practically relevant.
Maybe about that selection process in particular, we don't have case law in music yet, but we kind of have a lot going on in the image graphic art sphere. And one of the examples that was rejected by the US Copyright Office for want of a human author was this. If you look at it, it's called Théâtre d'Opéra Spatial. It's kind of impressive. Like, it's a very cool image, and it's huge, and it has this very like spacey, Dune-like feel in a way. I feel.
And what is it? A Dolly-generated image?
I think it's Mid-Journey, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay.
But there was a selection process there as well. Like, there were several different possibilities, and there was some tweaking going on as well. U.S. Copyright Office said it was not enough.
Okay, so even if you iterate on the prompt you've put in,
it's not necessarily sufficient.
Not necessarily sufficient.
Yeah, I'm not going to say yes or no. That's not going to happen tonight.
Still trying. After all these years, still trying to get a yes or no from you.
I remember what I was gonna say.
Yeah, sure.
So like, if you remove like the money aspect of it, like it's music is just like a way of communicating. And the thing is, like, now we have ChatGPT, we have all these image generator tools, but people aren't like suddenly creating art or like putting hours of their time into creating art. But we have all the tools to do it. So I feel like even if we have like all these advanced music creation tools, if you don't have anything to say, whatever form that may take, you're not really gonna, there's nothing much is gonna change, I think.
But you can say a lot with AI tools, and you can say very little with real guitars and real synthesizers as well. It's always okay.
So, well, I was just going to mention, like, so 2 generative music AI apps that I've had very different experiences on. So, and I'm actually a big fan of both. But so also as background, I play guitar. I'm not very good. That's why I'm not a famous musician. But I learned when I was 13. And there's an app called Jamble, Jambl. And basically it's like a generative AI app. And you just kind of like press a button on the screen, then you just do this with your finger. You can draw any pattern on the screen, and it will output an absolute banger. And I was, after I did it for the first time, I was like, oh, that doesn't feel like writing music. I've written actual music. I didn't feel like I wrote that. That's a really weird feeling. So that because it was doing so much that I didn't get the same core feeling that I get when I actually play guitar and write a song. But then if you look at an app like Make It, that I also had up on the screen. So basically, with Make It, you go in, you choose a backing track, which are all actually written by real musicians, and then you sing over the top into the phone, come up with your own melody, your own tune, and then you use all the AI effects and after processing to then fully create the track. And I think the difference is, on Make It, it's really possible to produce absolute dog shit. Like, it's possible to do that, and it just sounds terrible. So I feel like there's something you were saying in terms of how much human input there is into the creativity. One to me feels like writing music. The other one almost feels more like a game.
Okay. It's interesting because you could say that tools like this, where you just draw something on your screen and a banger
it's still a
comes
lot of
out.
fun.
It's still a lot of fun, but you could say that tools like this are like the ultimate democratization of the music making process. And I mean, must be something to say for that, no? I mean,
yes, and I think that's where we get into the point of
this
Jamble's really cool.
Yeah,
and
but this is what Instagram did for photography.
Yeah,
no?
it's like anyone can go on and just create like a 30-second clip and start publishing it. I think where it becomes an issue for the law.
That's not. I mean, do sometimes.
Yeah, to me,
I think those are the issues we're trying to grapple with as an industry and as a society. to figure out, because we don't want to dilute true creativity. We don't want to take anything away from real artists and musicians. But at the same time, in the same way that Instagram lets everyone take photos, why shouldn't we let everyone create? That's the kind of the thought experiment.
And isn't it ultimately up to the audience to decide? I mean, he can produce like bangers with AI, and if your fans on SoundCloud like it and stream it a lot, who are we to say, well, that's not art, that's not, I mean, do sometimes...
Yeah, to me it's also like just a decision of like, this is art, this isn't art, goes a long way. Like I said before, like now we have all these image generator apps, and how often do I see a Instagram page that's just these image generation apps? I barely see any of that. Like you can create whole stories, whole worlds with these tools, and not really a lot of people are using it in that way.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's the same in music.
What interests me is how far you would be willing to go as an artist. I mean, there's tons of tools out there. You can create lyrics, you can create artwork for your next banger on SoundCloud. You could go on and perform as a deepfake avatar. Where would you draw the line? What would work for you, and what would totally not be cool?
Yeah, I think it's just the you need to have some sort of vague feeling of like, oh, I made this, you know, because it's like I said, it's about expression, it's about communication, and it's often also like beyond words, so you don't really know what it is that you're looking for, but when you find it, you know, and you know, like, okay, I feel good about sharing this. But for me personally, I don't think I would have any problem with exploring it to like really the furthest that it can go. Okay. But it's just now that it's maybe a bit technical sometimes, and you know, you get lost in all the coding stuff, but in the future I'll be down to experiment with it more.
Yeah, Brecht.
I think that's a very important part of it, like the sense of control. If you're viewing, or if you're using AI as an artistic tool, as something to create music, and the artist is behind the steering wheel, then I think that sense of control is important. So if you like squiggle something and then something comes out and you don't really understand how A got to B, then it doesn't really, there's no real value to it, and you won't also get better the second time or the third time, and you won't actually arrive at something that you like better than the first thing you tried. So I think that is a very important part, where you want to, like any instrument, that you start, you know, by making very ugly noises, and then in the end you play symphonies. That learning curve, I think, is important. If we're talking about making art with AI, because of course AI in music can mean many things, and it can mean just generating background music for YouTube videos. In which case it's a completely different ballgame. Yeah.
Which they are doing right now, licensed.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's also a fantastic use case.
Like John Legend and Charlie XCX and stuff like that. So yeah. Okay. Maybe we should talk about another thing, which is like the model needs to be trained on huge amounts of data. You were talking about AI for good in your presentation. You are training your model on lots of data, SoundCloud data. How do you does every artist on SoundCloud agree to share the data with your model to train?
So actually, we trained all of our models before we were acquired by SoundCloud. Yeah. So we didn't just go and blanket use the. You're not allowed to just scrape whatever you want off the internet. I think most people know that. But so basically, when we first started in 2018, because I worked in the industry for a long time, I did 3 different partnerships with 3 different companies, and I got legal access to just under 1 million tracks, and that was what we trained the very, very first version of the Museo AI on, the one that could basically say, is it music or is it not music? And it only knew like 21 very basic genres when we first started. We're up to 84 now. But then when we had the basic version, we went out to all our clients who started using version 1, and then every new client we got, we gave them the option to opt in. Like, hey, BMG, of course you're welcome to use our product. You do not have to give us your data, which is music. But if you would like the system to improve, then you can sign an agreement. And we found about like 50-50 opt in. And, you know, there was a lot of other music tech companies at the same time. I had competitors when I started in 2018. And some of them acquired data illegally, which means that your company does not have any value. One of my competitors in particular said they had a blanket rule that if you used their tech, you were automatically opted in to share data.
Okay.
And so then a lot of their customers went, we don't like that, we're going to go with Musio. Okay. So I've always just been of the opinion you give people the choice with their own data. And that worked well for us. As I say, about half opted in, half didn't. And we were able to improve the system up to a certain point. But what we also do now with at SoundCloud, one of my favorite programs we've done, we call it like First Fans,
yes,
which is where we fingerprint every track that's uploaded to our Next Pro service, our distribution service. And then every track, we fingerprint it so the AI is listening to it. And then what we do is we look at the profiles of what all our users are listening to. We look at those fingerprints. And then we're able to suggest like 100 listeners to every new song that's uploaded. Yeah. And so you never get that issue where you upload a song and then you just get 0 plays. Mm-hmm. So that's what I call AI for good. We're not proactively training on that data as it's uploaded or the fan data. It's simply the fingerprints that we're able to look at to make a recommendation. Okay. But no, we don't blanket train.
What's the difference? Because when you say the AI listens to the track that's being uploaded, do artists need to opt in for that? Do they need to give you like a license to listen to their
tracks?
I
think the challenge is a lot of the DSPs, if you go to your sort of 50 pages of terms and conditions, which I'm not sure anybody reads on a streaming service, but pretty much if you upload your music to one of these systems, you're pretty much giving them carte blanche to do anything with the data. And I'm sure they all have slightly different wording. So at a ballpark case, you could say, theoretically, as SoundCloud, once that data is uploaded, there's not a lot of limitations. Mm-hmm. However, we're stricter than that at SoundCloud, and I personally am stricter than that in my approach, which is we still don't train models on data that hasn't opted in proactively to what we're doing, because we also don't need to. So when that first track is uploaded to our distributor and we're going to introduce 100 fans to it, we create the fingerprint. We discard the fingerprint, we discard the original audio, and all we're left with is a set of recommendations. So we're not kind of duplicating the track, we're not creating a false version or a second monetized version. Okay. We're simply using the power of AI to create recommendations. Yeah. And so that's completely within a pretty well-established use case and also it benefits the artist. We've had some lovely messages where artists who've been uploading tracks for years and never got any traction suddenly see the first 100 and then it kind of takes off because then it sort of snowballs. And we've had messages of like, have my people found me? Have I found them? This is incredible. I've never had, such, how do I get more of this? How do I, because we feel like we have the music, we have the audience, we're going to use AI to put those together. Mm-hmm.
That's, of course, a question I wanted to ask you as well. What's actually the problem with training data? I mean, how does it work from a legal perspective? Because what Hazel explains is you put in copyrighted material, you train the model, you take out the copyrighted material, and the model does things on its own. So it's not a real copy of an original. It's not like copying a Beatles song. How does that work from a legal perspective? So because it's really an important issue in trying to understand what the main issue is here from a legal perspective.
There's a lot going on in the question. I'm gonna try to give the essence of the story. First distinction: in the US, different rules. Cases ongoing, we're looking eagerly to see what they're going to say. But in the EU, different rules apply. Okay. So that's already an important distinction. And in the EU, the system is, in principle, copyright is if you do something that falls within an economic right, in principle, you have to ask authorization unless a certain exception applies. So this general rules find application here as well. Question here is, does what the AI does in terms of training, and when you put the work in the thing, is that an act of reproduction? Mm-hmm. That's going to be the issue.
So are you making a copy or not? Is that what it is?
That's a yes and no. The question is: are there any original and concrete elements from the pre-existing work that are being copied in that context. So yes, the word copy is there, but it's not like a full-blown copy. You have to have like bam, bam, exactly the same thing. No, that's not the criterion. Criterion is concrete and original elements. Have they been copied? And then, separate question, but linked. If we say, yes, there's a copy when we train the system, next question is there an exception? And there's an exception called text and data mining. And it's two-folded. So for scientific research and educational purposes, you can go very, very far. Mm-hmm. For commercial purposes, it's a bit more tricky because it applies to a certain extent, but people can opt out. So if you're a creator, you can say, nah, not with my work, and then it gets opted out. So we have we have different questions here. First, is it an active reproduction? We're not that sure yet. Mm-hmm. Does it fall within text and data mining? We're not that sure yet. And then the third one is a practical one. If it is an active reproduction and it is text and data mining, so you can opt out, how in heaven's name are you going to opt out for all of these separate things as an artist, if you want to, and provided that you want to?
Okay.
So that's, in essence, the situation as it stands now. The way it will be in the future depends on what the EU legislator will say. They're currently finalizing the text. They want to finalize it before Belgium gets the presidency next year. And I have heard that it's currently going in the direction of, yes, text and data mining applies.
Okay. So that would mean that you would need an opt-in or opt-out?
That you would, if you don't want your work to be used for AI training purposes, you would have to opt out.
Okay.
Specifically for each work, for each thing.
And at what stage would that need to be built in? At the moment you upload your track to SoundCloud or to YouTube or to Spotify? Because
the practicalities would not be decided in the law, but I would think as soon as possible.
What would work for you? What do you think would be feasible? And I'm asking this to all panelists because it's really tricky. At what point would you need to opt out? At the moment of creation, the moment of uploading, the moment of distribution? What would work for you?
Well, I think that nothing would work because I don't think the practicalities of this...
Everything else. That's the type of AI that we do. But like under this instance, Shazam would theoretically, you could opt out having your music recognized because it's a fingerprint and it uses AI to search to find. So, and I'm just like, knowing how that company was built, if a load of artists opt out, then that would be really hard to find that and take it down. But at the same time, I could see record labels going, do you know what? When someone Shazams your music and because they at a point of inspiration, they're enjoying it, they're probably then going to go and listen to it later, maybe buy a ticket, maybe engage with the artist. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've decided Shazam's fine, that can stay.
Yeah.
And then they're going to really struggle to look at every individual company and their use case and then decide which of them they like and which of them don't. And they might go scorched earth and pull it all down and then realize that, we were making 30% of our revenue from Shazam referrals. We need to put that back. And it's it's going to be a real nightmare.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be, oh dear. Yeah.
Looking forward to the reaction from the record companies in the
Let's
Q&A.
come back in a year, see where we are.
What would you do? At a certain point, you're given the option to opt out and not let or
me. I don't think I'm a good representation of artists.
No, just your personal opinion.
I don't care at all.
You don't care.
I think it's good, to use my music for AI training or whatever it is. I think it's cool.
Okay. Even if someone else can make an Ashley Morgan track and very resemblant and call it an Ashley Morgan track.
Yeah, that gets a bit weird. But yeah.
For my next single.
Yeah, I think as long as it's not with bad intentions or anything like that, I'm totally fine with it.
Can you filter that out? That people with bad intentions cannot
Can we
use
filter out people with bad intentions?
Can you opt out of bad intentions? That would be nice.
We got the human being problem again.
Yeah.
But I think you sound like you've got a similar approach to Grimes, who with her elf tech,
Grimes.
Grimes, yeah.
Where she was like, I'm just going to put my voice online and anyone can use it and just give me half. And I loved that. I was just like, oh, that's a really refreshing approach. And I know a lot of artists do feel that way. Because also what I love is she said, yeah, go for it. But she's also getting the financial benefit.
Yes.
And she also gets to be like a front runner in the field. So I feel like that's an interesting approach.
Yeah, I agree. I also like that approach.
Especially since under US law, you don't really have a lot of personality rights. So actually, she wouldn't have the right in the first place, right? Well, under continental European law, we've got personality rights, and the right to commercialize your own voice and your own image is much more present here. So it's very interesting how she was able to make like money out of nothing, really. So.
And I think the other thing I know we talked about like US and European law, but also because I built my company in Singapore, and we built our AI using kind of like European guidelines because they tend to be like the strictest in the world. But like China just doesn't have any of these limitations.
It's mayhem.
We do run the risk of like, say theoretically Shazam, which is like a UK-US company, had so many takedown issues and so many whatever issues that they go, Apple who've bought them go, do you know what? Shut it down. Do you know what? The next biggest competitor is ACR Cloud in China. And they ain't shutting down for anything.
And by the way, last week, 29th of November, a court in Beijing, first court in the world ever, said, yes, AI-generated image, AI can be an author. First time ever, and it was in China, so it's true.
And even culturally, the concept of a copy is different in China. Like they have whole studios where they replicate artworks,
of course,
and you can buy any guitar made to any spec that's like a Fender shape, a Gibson shape, and you can just be like, can you just make me a copy of that and whatever? They're like, yeah, $200. Like they don't have the same cultural concept of a copy. And they also don't have the law. So we also do risk as an industry losing innovation and creativity out of Europe and the US and the UK. I worry about that too. For like the future of the industry, the labels, the growth, the jobs, because a lot of other countries will just storm right ahead of us, I feel.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Sorry?
I mean, we just discussed making a track that sounds like from you. This is what I tell the AI. Make me a song like this European artist. And we all found it cool. And you said, that's cool. And now you say, when in China someone says, give me a guitar like this one, it's not cool, and you're worried.
Oh, I'm worried commercially for like the UK and like the stability of the music industry moving forward. And I think as well, Brett, do you want to take an anti-AI stance on why music generation might not be good? If maybe we haven't been balanced enough in like I definitely don't think you should just be able to duplicate anyone's work and make money from it. I should say that. I think AI is interesting. I think creativity is interesting. I would hate to see somebody else put a song on SoundCloud using the name Ashley Morgan, using his image and copying his sound, because if it took off and they got a load of money from it, that ain't right. That's his image. That's his money. So I think but I kind of think the tools are interesting.
Before you jump in, Brecht, maybe one question. What if he gets paid to make his music available for training? Does that make the whole story different? Because you get money for allowing your music to train the model. Yeah,
I feel like if you get some sort of financial involvement in whatever the AI does with your music, I think this, of course, a way better solution than just people ripping off your creativity.
Okay.
In France, they just introduced a law that would say potentially that if you use the work of somebody else in training the AI, then basically when something is made on that basis, the creator would be the person who was behind the initial work that was used to train the AI. So that may be something that would be of interest to me. I'm not sure whether it will become law, to be honest. But
sounds interesting anyway. Yeah. Brecht, sorry, I interrupted you.
So, I think it's important.
He did offer to play devil's advocate.
I'm very happy to do that. Yes, I do think that I should point out that we're talking about very many different things and all sort of calling them AI. So I think there seems to be a bit of a consensus that if you outright copy someone's work of arts and don't credit them, or they don't get paid, that is offensive, and that is sort of the I think the metaphor that you were going for with the guitar as well. But what we were talking about earlier was, am I as an artist opting in or out of my material being used by some sort of AI system that listens to all music that it can get its hands on? And that is a completely different question. Whether you also want to do that or not is something else, but that is far less offensive or controversial than being able to just copy a song and then pass it off as your own.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important bit. With regard to what I think the negatives of using of AI in music productions in production.
Yeah, like does it like devalue the original to be relentlessly copied? Sorry, I don't mean to take your job.
I'm fine.
I'm the AI you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think so. I think the copyright aspect is definitely like a big worry. I think ownership is probably, I'm not sure from legal point of view, but I think ownership and copyright are different things. It's like, did the machine make this or did I make this? I think is a big worry. Another thing that I think that we haven't really discussed here, but that I think people are worried about is the sheer amount of new music that could flood the market, and what is the quality of that? And then there's quality, but there's also originality. Like, am I going to make a song and think, oh, this really sounds great, and it is great, but then maybe you're at home making the exact same song because you have the same tools and you don't really have a lot of customizability and not a lot
but that
of,
already happens
space.
now without AI. So
yes, absolutely, and I think some people. So I'm not usually on the pessimistic side of these kind of things, but I do think there are some very important caveats, and I think that is one thing that people are concerned about. Like, are we going to just create a lot of grey sludge,
of course,
and
sounding the same? And
I don't think we need to. I think with the right kind of tools and also the right ways of using and abusing those tools, in that sense, I think AI is pretty much like any other technological or music technology development, with a few caveats, because it is a different animal entirely.
Yeah. Maybe one last caveat, because I'm looking at the clock, and something that I would love to hear your opinion about is it's all going so quick. Now I sound really old. It's all going so quickly. I mean, it's evolving in like half a year's time. I mean, AI has been around for longer, but since 2022, everyone is talking about AI and it's a massive threat or it's a massive opportunity. It's all evolving very, very rapidly, from a legal point of view, from a creative point of view, from a production side of things. Don't you think that, I mean, how should we tackle the issue of education? How should we keep everyone up to speed, so that you as an artist, or you as a producer, or you from a legal point of view, or me as a layman and just listening to music, what should we do to keep everyone up to speed? Because only in that way, is my feeling, will it be accessible to all? Will it be ethically maybe diverse enough, stuff like that? Do you have any opinions on that? How we should tackle the fact that these kind of technical developments are moving so rapidly that it's almost impossible to be aware of what is happening? How should we tackle that issue? I think that's really important.
So I think that the Elon Musk approach was to say, let's all stop doing this right now and think first, and then a few months later, like, release his own kind of AI tool. So I don't think that's what we should do. I think all of us, and then especially all who aren't, the biggest 5 companies in the world, should continue to experiment with these kind of tools. Not just like technically what can we do, but also what should we do, what is ethical, and what has artistic value. And I think by doing that is probably the only, and by keeping the discussion going, that's probably the only way we can sort of evolve in our acceptance and in seeing business cases and seeing AI for good, as well as the pitfalls.
Actually, you've been a student at PXL Music. If you would study there right now, would you like to have a course, an AI production course, or maybe
Yeah, just I feel.
Do you feel that it needs to be like baked into the
Definitely.
to the education?
I feel like especially nowadays, I feel like education should be updated every like almost month or something.
Okay.
Yeah, but like even like outside of education, I think people who are able to take all of this techie information and digest it into something that's more accessible to everyone, I think those channels are pretty important. Because for me, the only way I can stay updated is to just find some of these like Instagram pages or whatever, or Twitter accounts, and
make
just
it digestible. And
because I don't have like time to
Sure.
you know, go through all the technical stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe from the KULeuven promotion point
Please-
of view,
please do.
there is a master in AI that is available at KULeuven. It's interdisciplinary, and it brings together people from all of the different faculties, including the best one, Faculty of Law and Criminology. No, I don't mean that, by the way. There's a course, for example, on AI ethics and regulation, and then from all different types of perspectives, like cybersecurity, non-discrimination law. There's one class on AI and intellectual property law as well. But so it combines people from everywhere. It's a lot of computer science people, but also people from humanities, social sciences, and stuff. And there's like 60 students, I think, every year. And I've been told it's a very interesting.
And it's important to bring these points of view together.
Yes, okay. And then there's a postgraduate program as well, so things are moving in that context as well. It was established this very year, actually, as the idea of continuous learning via KULeuven and stuff like that. And I try to incorporate it as much as possible in my own lectures as well. I teach trademark law here in Brussels, and there was a particular bit on AI and trademarks, and then the mandatory class this Thursday. So I try to do my bit, and I think education is obviously, I know that you can't all join in the auditorium to have the discussion with us, but I think further talking about it in events like this is also very important.
Okay. Hazel, final remark?
I signed up to something called the Aletheia framework, which is an open source ethical AI. It's kind of like 60 to 80 categories that you can kind of assess and analyze whether what you're doing is ethical. I think there are many, but this is just the one that I was a part of. And I'm also a believer that if AI is something that humans want to do, if it's replicating something humans want to do, or if it's replicating something that's not physically possible, like tagging 5 million tracks a day, then it's a guideline for, that makes it ethical use. But I think the challenge with generative AI is humans love to write music. They love to be creative. Who didn't want to be a rock star when they were growing up? Me, definitely. And so really trying to put a framework around our thoughts about what is ethical AI.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. I would like to open up to the audience for some questions. But first of all, I would like to thank you all, Josephine, Brecht, Ashley, and Hazel. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.
Thanks. This time for questions, and I can imagine there are a lot of questions. I can imagine there's a microphone as well, since we're recording it. Yes, Joyce has a mic, and maybe let's start in the front. Could you just tell us who you are? Are you an artist or?
No, I'm Eric. I am a live music programmer.
Okay.
And I came to this talk indeed as someone working in the industry, but also someone who studied business, but was specializing towards machine learning. So I was very curious. But while listening to the conversation, even though I was and I know what to kind of expect, but the part about me that is very from me that is very involved in thinking about decoloniality couldn't help but get into this because I was thinking of okay, now for example in the US actors encourage music colonization. For me, I think sometimes things like acid Arab and whatnot are some kind of music colonization in a certain way where you can go and get cultural creations that were not created in the format to be commercializable in the West and be okay, it doesn't really belong to anyone, take it, and then go and all this kind of stuff. So I've felt plus also a lot of research is always done with good intentions in mind, but when you think about it, then your researchers and university people doing this, creating because they are very curious and they want to progressor or something, they can never control what it gets used for. And used for a lot of this technology is used for very bad things, and you can say anti-terrorism, but nowadays with what's happening in Palestine, we know damn well who gets called a terrorist has like implications that for me are also not based on ethics and morals, and also the fact that I'm hearing all of this like being talks in a way when it comes to legality, what is legal and whatnot. We all know that what is legal is not moral. So I'm also very worried about hearing about legality when it comes to all these kind of things and progressing towards a world that will need more and more technology when we know that technology comes at a price of black people. I'm talking about the Congo, but also people who are fabricating those things. And the more and more technology we create, the more we get excited about things without thinking, the more it's going to lead to, yeah, okay, we need to create more and more and more and more. So, and also this whole thing of opting out is not always a possibility when there is coercion, because when you are in a precarious situations and people tell you that if you want this opportunity and to get out of thing, you have to accept things, because historically that's the way things have worked. So opting out is only a possibility where you're already in the position to be able to opt out for survival. I don't know. I don't really have a question in the end. I just feel like those things were just running through my mind the whole thing.
That's like another whole hour panel. We should all get down and up bring this gentleman up here.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question you like to raise. It's a question about ethical AI. It's a question about inclusion in AI as well. No,
it's also a question about like machine learning can be interesting. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, but when everything can very much and tends to produce is targeting the same people, are in conversations like this, sometimes too centered on Western focus and questions of privilege, because we're not, from my identities in a part I may be, but just from being in this room, I'm less and less part of the people who are going to suffer from the widespread of AI. Yeah. When does it need to also be stopped? Great, it can, in fact, it can impact the future, but when does it maybe need to be stopped, because its consequences we already know that they're too high compared to what, so that's...
There was an issue with image generating AI. When you ask to draw a person, it's always like a white person, and it's a male white figure. That how do we have to tackle this? I mean, I don't have an idea, but how do we tackle these kinds of issues? Yeah,
I'm far from an expert on resolving those, but I do think that everyone working in this field should be aware of some of the issues, and I started listing a few, but definitely bias of AI systems, machine learning systems, whether it's about including groups of people or excluding groups of people, like, is something that is always going to be a concern, and I think it's just as much an issue. Maybe more in some cases in creative applications. You know, obviously when we're talking about anti-terrorism, has been said a few times, and like visual recognition and all of those AIs. Then there are very real, very tangible and well-known problems with bias, like racial bias, gender bias, and all of that. But I'm sure if we're talking about AI for music generation, that's also going to be an issue where maybe we are, for instance, completely skewed towards Western music, depending on what it's trained on, but also how it's sort of built. And yeah, that is absolutely something to be aware of. And I think we can extrapolate from what I said earlier. You need to involve the artists in the process and think about, you know, what is the artistic vision, what is the actual use and the actual value, and then you have to go beyond that and think about which artists are we actually including. Is it just like a group of people that are very mainstream, very popular in a very specific geographic location, or do we want to to provide better representation?
Josephine, you wanted to jump in?
So I come from the Center of IT and IP law, and I'm very much an intellectual property law person, but our center is like 100 people. We are 20 of us in IP, 80 full-time researchers at KULeuven at the moment on IT law, and I think 60 of them are full-time researching on those very issues, on AI and discrimination and more. I think there's 2 on specifically on racial bias, gender bias also 2 at the moment. So just because I don't know a lot about the regulation on IT aspects in particular and non-discrimination, is a very, very big aspect of what we are currently doing. But I don't feel qualified enough to say what is happening on that front in detail. I do know that it is a point as well in the context of the AI Act.
Okay.
But I'd have to like call in a helpline to make sure that I wouldn't be saying anything. But it's true. It's 100% true what you're saying. When my PhD is about copyright contracts in particular and the risks of unfair treatment of musicians that are in a weaker bargaining position, and it's everywhere is the same finding. Like black people are getting the brunt of the shit basically, and with Motown, and one of the most famous recent example is the Lion King song, right? South African case where this guy signed away his rights for like 2 pennies when he was really clueless, basically. And I think it was his estate quite recently that
law front. You guys were talking more of European law in China, but what about international law? What's the future there? Because now we were really staying in the more known spaces. But what about crossing the lines in between? Is there something already in the works there, or?
There is something in the works, but it's going, as everything is on the international law field, very, very slowly. So there's this thing called the World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, and they've been having these conversations on AI and IP. So it's basically a lot of people talking and saying the exact same thing all over again. But the good thing is that of over like 3,000 people are being brought together online and in the premises in Geneva as well. And they're hoping to eventually make something, right? So they've already had significant output in terms of bringing all the issues together. There's been 4 conferences of 2 days now, very well attended, a lot of output. There's a lot of reports on all the specific issues and what they think about it. So there's WIPO. And then there's, on the other hand, also international copyright organizations. I was in Paris in June of last year, 3-day conference on artificial intelligence and copyright law. So there were like 500 people there, and the conference was built up of all of these national reports. So all of the countries with members of this association, and that's like all of them, they all brought national reports. They had to fill in the questionnaire, like, what is your state on this? What is this? What is this? What is this? I wrote the questionnaire for Belgium. It was like 25 pages or something. We brought everything together, and then they started talking about it. It's, at this moment, still talking, which is not a lot. I prefer doing, but okay. But again, moving very slowly, but in the right direction, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question over there, maybe in the back.
Hi, I'm Astrid. Thanks. I'm an artist, and one of the things that I've been thinking about during this talk is I was very surprised to hear that when training AI for music and putting different music that already exists and that is already copyrighted into it, that people could be able to give their consent or not. Because I personally, of course, I have no more valid opinion than anyone else. I find it hard to differentiate between myself as an artist also listening to something on a loop. Like, for example, if I listen...
It would be the essential difference, I would say. And standing on the shoulders of giants, it was already said 400 years ago, we do feed off of what our environment provides us with, and all of the output we provide is, in a sense, linked and maybe even the result of what we have read, we have listened to in the past. But I stick to my original answer in the sense that what happens in the human mind when I read something, it gets indeed processed in my brain, but I'm a human, right? And conversely, when something technological happens, when there's an external factor that does something, then copyright law every time needs to think again about, okay, there's this new thing, how are we going to apply it? When the internet happened, everybody in copyright law was like, well, shit, what do we do now? And every time some new question arose, okay, so what happens if you put a hyperlink online? Then they decided about that. Okay, so what happens if you put an embedded link? So there's a photo of the video clip as well. What happens if you put a thumbnail? What happens if you play the music in a dentist's office? What happens if you play the music in a hotel? So all of these incremental changes happen, and we all of a sudden have to think again about how to apply it. And in each of these situations, the traditional concepts were applied to new situations, so reproduction, communication to the public, and every time they thought about it, gave criteria and said yes and no. And the same thing will happen now. Mm-hmm. What I only can do is give the criteria and think about how they may be applied in such a context. I'm not giving a value judgment at this particular stage.
Okay, Hazel?
I loved your question because I feel like it just goes right into philosophy more than it goes into law. Because, like, say, we play a song to the room right now. I can kind of listen to the song with my brain, and I can listen to it and I can remember it. And then, even if I wanted, I could walk out of the room and I could sing it to myself in my head, and that's technically not a reproduction as the law understands it, but I can sing it to myself in my head as many times as I want and nobody can stop me. And I find that fascinating because all we're doing a lot of the time with AI is we've externalized that process. And I'm kind of excited, and at some point the law may reference an organic being's reproduction versus a computer's technological reproduction. At the minute, anything that happens inside the human brain that's up to you. But I don't know if any other artists in the audience, just like what you said. I remember once I thought I'd written an absolute banger of a song, and I think I played it for my brother, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's this really famous song," and I was like, "God damn it! All right, forget it. I thought I wrote it, but obviously I just heard it and then reproduced it." So
classic.
Yeah, done it plenty of times. So I think humans are very, very fallible, and often we need the test cases for the law to catch up, and like you described with the internet.
And maybe as well, the question is also, what do we want the law to achieve, right? If you want to change the law and make society better over time, we want to decide on how to make things better and make more just over time, then the question maybe not necessarily is, okay, legally speaking, I think that a reproduction in an external thing is the same as a reproduction inside the human brain, but consequentially, what would happen? And consequently, if you put in all the steps over time, if we allow this, what society will we get into? As you were saying before, what will we allow to happen? Mm-hmm. And if we're being a bit like idealistic and naive, as I do tend to call myself slightly at times, is maybe okay if we don't want the consequence of this legal decision to materialize in practice, well, maybe then we shouldn't make the decision in the first place.
Get it. Mm-hmm. Brecht, maybe final remark and then one final question from the audience?
Yes, so I also love the question, and what I find fascinating is that in the context of AI music production, we see, because I think the question kind of comes down to why do different rules apply to a human as to an
exactly.
AI? And I think that's fascinating in part because if we're talking about traditional music production, you would have a human and then maybe a grand piano. Mm-hmm. And in this metaphor, we're thinking of the AI as the human, mm-hmm. not as the grand piano.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So what now if the grand piano becomes a tape machine with a microphone and we're making this sound art? There's still the human, and then there's an instrument,
sure,
for all intents and purposes, and that is very clear. So in this metaphor, where the tape machine becomes something more intelligent, becomes a computer, it becomes something smarter. Why, when we say okay, now it's AI music, why is the AI replacing the human and not the instruments? Mm-hmm. So I think it's very interesting to think of an AI and automatically say, okay, the AI is replacing the human in the music making metaphor, and not saying the AI is yet another tool that the human is using to make music.
Before. Yeah, sure.
Sure. And of course, there is a boundary there where it's absolutely possible to generate music, endlessly with just an AI, and there's no human inside. So I guess.
How do we avoid some neckbeard guy or gal? I'm a poet, so I think I've picked the least lucrative arts to practice. So I'm not worried about money at all, and I'm not even worried about reproduction. But I am worried about production. More specifically, how do we avoid some neckbeard guy or gal creating an algorithm that, let's stick to music, picks every possible do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, puts it in an algorithm and creates all possible music to ever be made, ever. Puts a patent on it and just has everything made already. Somebody comes up with a certain melody, and then the guy goes, well, I've made this actually, so you have to pay me money. How do we avoid this issue?
This is interesting. Do you have a half hour?
So somebody did. And I was horrified. Somebody, in the way you can brute force a password with every variation ever, somebody brute forced melodies because there's a limited number of notes to create every melody ever. And I was absolutely horrified until I also learned that they then open sourced all of that information. And it's been instrumental. I can't remember the chap's name off the top of my head, but basically a lot less copyright infringement cases in music have now been successful because there's an open source version of every melody that's ever existed. Which, sorry? I presented it without comment. I am not the man who did it in this particular case. Well, I think, I take it back to, and sorry for anyone who didn't hear, the question was...
Shall we do a different panel on that question?
Yeah, was it a good thing? I guess just my one comment to that would be, if you ever go and listen to a song, and then someone said, oh, Ed Sheeran's is a copy of that. He's had it a few times. But when you listen, I think every human being has an opinion of, oh, yeah, that is exactly the same, or I don't hear it. I don't hear it being the same at all. So I think it's just one more tool, and it still goes to the court. It's still a panel of peers. It's still a judgment. And I disagree with some of the cases. Sometimes I think there's clearly been a copy and nothing happens. Sometimes I don't hear the similarity at all, even as a musician, and that person gets awarded it. So I almost present it without judgment, but I just think it's interesting that somebody did it because somebody believed strongly enough that they maybe they also wanted to open source it before somebody else did it and registered it all privately. So is it also the lesser of two evils?
Somebody actually did that with literature as well. They made a library of Babel, I think it's called.
We are all endless monkeys on endless typewriters.
There we go. You saved that one for last.
Saved it.
Final question here in the front. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to make it a question, but because the topic of the panel is music, but we're not talking really about music. We're talking about like numbers, low shit, and this kind of stuff. But you're not making music. You're just like thinking about the fact that AI is a tool. That's a fact. That's just some machine that can't just be fed by itself. That's the only thing. Because if you feed the AI with itself, it just disappears. So it's important to know.
You can do it, can't you?
And so basically, it's just based on power using human stuff. So operation and just copyright stuff, but just about money and operation and power. But the point about making music is making. And we're not talking about it. We're talking about using tools. When you use an instrument, you're learning and making music. When you use the robot, you're not making music. You're just like doing stuff and conceptualizing. You conceptualize something, but that's something else, I guess. And so I think it's important to talk about an industry when this is an industry. Maybe there is some medium with music industry, this kind of stuff, but still we're talking about industry and music and money. But if we think about it without this money stuff and industry shit, I don't think a lot of people are going to use AI at all. And that's not even useful, because if you want to make music, then you meet people, you make music. If you want to make images, you meet people and make images with them. That's the point.
Okay.
And so I don't really understand the big fantasy and phantasm about AI in this specific creative field, because if we talk about creativity, then the robot is just a tool and is not even being that big because we don't need it at the end.
Okay. Ashley, you're nodding.
I vaguely get a sense of what you're getting at, and for me personally, I also think about this a lot. I often think about music. What was it before recording technology? And it's also like a form of communication. And once music gets recorded and once more technology gets involved, it becomes some sort of abstract, intellectual thing. But when you come down to what music actually is, it's a very human thing. And I totally agree that you can never really remove that from it. But like for me, my fantasy of like AI is how you can, because now we have instruments like guitars and pianos and all those instruments that we know from the past. But I feel like with AI we can create like new instruments and new ways for people's like physical expression of emotion and stuff to be translated into new sounds, and it just opens up like a whole world of possibility of like imagination, because before we might have just imagined in guitar songs and piano songs, but I feel like as we go deeper into this AI stuff, we can just start imagining in different sounds, different textures, and have it really be in the moment, because I feel like that's what music is something that's very tied to the moment. And I personally feel that's why it's very good to talk about it, and I guess.
I love that. I think I agree. I wish we lived in like a Star Trek post-money society where no one needed to earn money, and I don't know if there's any of the Trekkies in the house, just me, okay. I wish that money wasn't a thing, but music's still globally a $19 billion a year business. And I worry that if those of us who care about musicians getting a cut don't do anything, then tech and the big players will just take that. They ain't got no problem taking that 19 billion off all of us. So I think it's right. It's not the passionate part of music. It's not the exciting part. But, in the same way you talked about AI tools, people felt the same way when the synth came out. People said, this isn't a real musical instrument. It's not like a piano. You can just press one button and it'll just play a tune. People felt the same way about sampling when that first came out. That's not writing a real song. And I hope that we can create this as like the next evolution of music. But I think it's important for musicians, producers, and the people at the forefront of creativity to also have a voice. That's my hope. That's what I want to be part of.
Get the artists involved.
Yes, artists involved.
Yes.
But in this case, that's not about a tool, because the synth is not really, and it's not at all the same thing, because we're talking about AI, so we're talking about a machine that learns from human production. That's the difference. And so the synth or any instrument or any source of production and about creativity is totally different than a machine that just copy the way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Can I cut the discussion short here, because we're running out of time, and please continue the discussion over drinks. I mean, it's a really interesting point, and I'm not trying to disrespect the point you are trying to make, but I'd like to wrap it up here for this evening. I want to thank you all, first of all, for being here, people at home listening or watching the live stream as well, my panelists, Josephine, Brecht, Ashley, and Hazel, thank you very much once again. I would like to thank KULeuven and Ancienne Belgique for having us, and also Music Tech Belgium for co-organizing this evening. I hope you found it useful, you found it fun. I did, so thank you all very much. Bye. Drinks? You're out, drinks.